to get out of the starting blocks.
Yeah.
South Africa is a difficult country to do business, especially if you're not the kind of entrepreneur that we're used to in this country.
Yeah,
right?
and obviously it's identifying the gaps, and that's kind of what
Yeah.
we as entrepreneurs, as South Africans, need to do, is find that gap. But how do you find that gap? I mean, there's so many things happening around us.
Yeah, so I mean, so the study of gapology, which is effectively what entrepreneurs do. It's interesting, you know, entrepreneurship is not something you can teach. People either have it or they don't, which is just the ability to come in and see opportunities where they don't exist. But so the question around how do you find the gap, it's typically around three things. It's you got to find something people are willing to pay for that they need now, and they have the money to pay for it. The minute you tick those three boxes, you're in business. So it doesn't matter what it is. You could be selling water, you could be selling ice cream, you could be doing anything. The minute you understand those three things, you effectively have found a gap in the market, and you can start servicing that market.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you do know. Now, I mean, you were part of this Dragon's Den program.
Yes.
Identifying successful entrepreneurs,
yes,
and investing in those businesses. So, you know, how do you know when somebody is a successful entrepreneur? Obviously, their characters, their traits that you're looking for in people.
Yeah. So typically, for me, I look for three things. First thing I look for is somebody who's failed before. So I'd never back my money or put my money in somebody who hasn't tried something and hasn't failed. Because if you haven't failed, the theory of failure, you know, entrepreneurship is interesting. It's a lot like swimming. So if I gave you a textbook on how to swim and you read it for 3 years and then I took you and chucked you in the ocean, you'd sink. Because swimming isn't a theory thing, it's a practice thing. You have to do it to know how to do it. So the first thing I'd say is it's somebody who's failed. I love people who failed because they've proven they've tried something and that they know what's on the other side of not succeeding, which is this failure thing. The second is somebody who believes in themselves even when there's ridiculous odds to suggest it's not going to work. You know, I always say entrepreneurs are crazy. You have to be crazy to be an entrepreneur. Because you got to believe you're going to make money month end, which often you're not.
Yeah.
You got to believe you can compete with big companies, which often you can't. You got to believe you can reach all your customers, which often you won't. And you have to believe you can do so cheaply and cost effectively and make a profit, which in the early days you probably won't do. If you don't believe those four things, you're not going to succeed as an entrepreneur. So you've absolutely got to be certifiable, absolutely crazy. And then
Hey, how's it, everybody? Welcome back to FANatics. My name is Alex, your host for today, with my esteemed colleagues on either side of me today, Sholin and Tieko. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. Guys, remember to follow us at Badger of Liberty. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, as well as TikTok. Right, guys, so there we open up the show with a guy we featured on some quote cards, choice selectively, chosen selectively rather by Sholin. So a little ode to Sholin there. Prefacing our conversation that we're going to have today, and we've looked a lot recently at informal economies, the township economy, the value of small businesses. We've kind of pivoted away from looking exclusively at what you can do internally in your community, from picking up litter, fixing potholes, to a little bit more of a business focus. And the reason for this today, for sharing this Vusi Kwayo clip, is because there are some movements coming from the government about how to transition spaza shops to formal businesses, which will, according to the small business, I can't never remember actual title. She is a small business development minister. Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams says that we'll boost the sustainability of the spaza shop and informal economy. Now, the last thing I remember Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams for was either wanting to effectively tax people for watching Netflix, and he had a party in lockdown. But aside from that, I think this is kind of in the right direction. The wording in the start of this article was a bit strange, but effectively what they want to do is there are plans afoot to amend legislation to provide norms and standards for common business licensing framework for spaza shop owners. Now, I think this conversation probably requires a lot more policy analysis than I think at least myself is capable of. But I think maybe if more of our senior colleagues would be able to speak to this. But Tioko, I think the conversation I want to have today is more around the bringing on board helping out, formalizing the informal economy. Do you, from having seen the article, do you think this is something that's achievable? Is the government heading in the right direction here, or are we kind of looking at, are they just trying to get tax out of hardworking citizens? What's your view here?
Well, I think that's precisely the question on my mind, whether or not this is not just a way for them to get tax and to regulate the industry. I mean, the question that I found myself asking myself, having read the article, is what the actual plans are. Because I don't think the article touches on the actual plans. The minister does not tell us what the actual plans are. They tell us that there are plans that they are working around. So I think one will be able to make an informed opinion around the issue once they've read the plans. But for now, what I understand from this is that they want to register spaza people, one. Two, so they can have their information on their database and stuff of that nature. I think there's no harm in simply registering, formalizing, and having these people who run such businesses on your database. The information might be necessary at some point, like we have seen in 2020 when the government needed to support spazas because we had lockdowns. They did not have the spaza shops owners' details and everything of that nature. But now there's a second question that I'm asking myself: how exactly the minister thinks formalizing the industry would boost growth? I think to that very question, I think I that's where I'm wondering if she's not coming from the angle of collecting taxes from spaza shops, so government has more money and stuff of that nature. If that is the angle she's coming from, then it's absolutely a terrible angle. We can't have a government that really relies on mainly citizens and small businesses for an income and growth. Government needs to start focusing on bigger projects that can really bring us growth, creating an environment that is business conducive, so businesses can excel in it and stuff of that nature. But for now, I don't think one can give a thorough analysis around this because the actual plans are not shared at all.
No, absolutely. Shalom, we had an article shared recently, which we published from one of our interns who's really come into his own, and that's an article from Simo Zulu, and his article is titled 6 Reasons Why There's Big Business and Small Business. And I think we've touched on this before, but one of the things that he points out is that, according to his research, 17% of employment comes from the informal sector and the township economy. So there's obviously massive potential here. And one of the things that Seymour touches on is, expanding opportunities, access to funding. Certainly nothing wrong with the government making it easier to register a business, get on board. I think that could be applied across the board. So are we looking at the kind of mentality that maybe we should be not just helping the small guy, which we should, but actually just as an approach to the country is making business easier?
Yeah, exactly. That's an important point you raised. That Diego raised crucial points, I think, as well regarding this. Is that in the article, I must say that I appreciate the fact that finally some recognition is being given to the fact that entrepreneurship in the forms of spaza shops, shops in townships, they are actually vital to, as we previously spoke about, like the Kashi economy, that they basically are the reason why people are able to buy and sell things at an affordable price in communities that are not necessarily, middle class or wealthier, but for low income communities are actually able to gain goods from these types of shops. And one of the things I would probably also raise is that in the article, our Minister of Small Business Development, she's also rather causing some concern because a lot of the language refers to things like regulation. And that is already an impediment with regards to this, because we must also understand that when the government standardizes a form of legislation, whatever the case may be with her, where all township spaza shops are meant to be registered, need to have BE, requirements that they need to meet. Is that the route that we're going to go with this? because eventually we will see that it will, instead of promoting job creation or promoting entrepreneurship, it will instead hinder it, because now people sit back and are like, oh no, but the government goes to this and this community and takes a few pictures and brags about business development, but over here we do not know how the documents need to be filled out. We don't have any advice on how many of these requirements need to be met and so forth, and it will eventually become a hindrance for the processing of documents to take place. We already know that's a common situation in South Africa, and that would probably just be my concern, is that when there is discussion about regulation, it will most likely hinder the progression of small businesses being established, where all it requires is somebody's initiative. But when it comes to the government supporting small businesses, my question would also be, which small businesses are you going to be supporting and how? And what requirements do they need to meet? You know what I mean? Because eventually it might just be a situation where the government's like, especially since we have things like affirmative action, PE policies, like, oh no, we're only helping black small businesses, and in this specific area. They need to be located somewhere in Soweto, but if there's one in the Eastern Cape, we don't care. That might even be a situation that we experience. So I would really be cautious with suggestions like this, that, you know what, that might just hinder the progress.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not even unfounded warnings there, Sholin, because we saw it in lockdown when there was support for tourism players in the tourism industry, and that was, I think, Kubane was the minister at the time of that department, and they spread funds according to your sort of BE credentials. So I think the point here is I think, got to be very cautious about what the government is saying, and like Tiago says, once the thing comes out, once more actions plans come into play, we'll have to look at those critically. And I think, just before Tiago, I want to give you the final word, but I think just something here which also kind of made me feel a little bit, gave me some shivers, was that this single database would allow the state to monitor and regulate the trends within the retail space. So like that for me was like a bit of a red flag. But any final comments here, Tiago, before we move on?
Well, my final comments would be, around first and foremost, exactly what you just mentioned. You look at the trends, then what do you do after that? And I think it's precisely what Sholin spoke to. We are dealing here with a government that loves interfering within the free market, causing complications along the way. So I think chances, as Sholin has mentioned, are that they're going to mess this up. But the second question that comes out is a question around why the government feels the need to itself be the one to initiate the process of bringing spaza shop owners together so they can stock together and stuff of that nature. I mean, is that not what business people should do by themselves? I mean, the business community can organize themselves. And I take it that this idea comes from the whole idea of a lot of Pakistan spaza owners. Normally what they do is that they work together, they buy stocks in bulks, then it becomes cheaper that way, they divide it, then their prices get to be cheaper, and that's how their spazas keep on sustaining, whereas other spazas of people who buy for themselves stock alone at normal prices are not cheaper. But they did not need any government to do that for them. The business people came together and did this for themselves. I think what the government should be doing is to encourage spaza people to do this, as opposed to the government doing it for the spaza people themselves. It doesn't make sense that government wants to do such a job on behalf of the people. I think this is spoon feeding the people, but the consequences in future will be quite dire, because we'll have a situation whereby in future, if business people are unhappy about certain decisions taken there, we might have a protest, departments closed, and stuff of that nature, because the government has decided to implicate itself in this thing that does not involve them at all in this aspect.
Sholin, you look like you're on the edge of your seat there.
Yes, I just want to add to what Diego said there. Yeah, exactly. If the government or our minister wants to actually help, they shouldn't be, forcing businesses to come together in whatever collective. They should instead be creating platforms for small businesses and spaza shops even to be showcasing what they have on sale. That's something I think of, inviting investors from overseas, even taking spaza shop owners or people that sell whatever merchandise and small business owners, taking them overseas and showcasing their work to the world. That's the type of platform that should be created, and let the market then decide which succeeds and which does not. Because otherwise, we will have a situation where it will depend on your connections, not only to the government, but also to the ANC about whether or not your spaza shop or small business will eventually succeed. And that's a dangerous situation to be in. So definitely, I think platforms should be created where conferences or investment situations are showcased across the board for everyone to come to and be like, guys, showcase and bring whatever you bring to the table and show it to investors. And that's what I think should take place.
I think I want to disagree. If I'm allowed to. I want to disagree simply because spaza shops are local community shops, and I don't think they necessarily need to showcase to investors. They sell mainly to their communities. What needs to be done is that I think they should be given the space, spaza shops, as the guy. What's his name? The guy we opened the program with.
Vusi Tembekwaya.
As Vusi Tembekwaya mentioned, that the job of an entrepreneur is to identify where there is a gap and find a way of filling that gap and make money out of that. I think, yes, you could empower the spaza shop people with information that could assist them with identifying what gaps exist in their communities that they could fit in and stuff of that nature. But it's not even that big, right? This does not even need much of government intervention. And I think it's like saloons. It's an industry that you should just allow to flow by itself and allow people to figure out what's missing where they are. Have them, yes, registered, but let people figure out what's on demand and what they can supply so they can make their income there.
Yeah, I think what this statement from Deveni Abrams to me sounds like is thinking too hard. I mean, I think there's some merit to it, but let's just keep people safe. You know, you've got informal street traders. Where's the police presence? So how are we protecting people so that the inventory doesn't get stolen? Going to, you know, it's a cash economy. You've got people traveling to and from in public transport with a lot of cash that is at risk. You know, so there's a lot of small things that the government could do without, that they could even get a lot of praise for doing without conferences and legislation, just really just doing what we have or doing what we can do better. But I think obviously this ties in very well to our kind of follow-up from last week from Kasi Economy's our sort of feature of them. But the story that one of the stories we actually spoke about and Sholin shared a clip of it was this guy Tsepo who sold biscuits. And since then, this is pretty remarkable. So Kasi Economy shared it on their Facebook page, and if we look here, it got shared it got reached almost over 4 million people just from this page showcasing his business. And now Tsepo Yadilemo is, I mean, he's flourishing. He's got a brand, he's got a uniform, he's got a logo. I think it's just incredible. Tioko, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I think this is brilliant. What normally we would take as not such a big story has become a big story. And I think it absolutely deserves to be a big story because it's an encouraging story, a story of a young person who made it in an industry, bought a car, things did not go well, lost his job, and he was not ashamed to say that, you know what, I'd like to keep my car, I'd still like to put food on my table. I'm gonna go and sell biscuits and cookies at the streets. And he's making an income for himself, right? It reminds me of a story that trended about 2 years ago of, I don't remember what the name of the guy was, but I think he was posted on Kasi Economy as well, who was selling biscuits as well in Johannesburg. And Metro Police in Johannesburg took his stock because he's an informal trader and he couldn't trade like that. But his name was Itumeleng, I remember. But he mentioned that he was making 15,000 rand on a monthly basis for himself. Now that's a salary from making these biscuits and selling them. He's making that. So this is definitely a good story. And I hope that we'll have many more such good stories coming up. And organizations such as Kasi Economy sharing such stories so they can inspire other people and show them that really there's no shame in any kind of business. Anything that can bring you an income, so long as it's legal, so long as you're not harming the next person, really go for it, be comfortable with it, get your income, put food on your table for yourself and your family members with that kind of dignity. I think it's a brilliant story, really, and more of such stories should be encouraged. More citizens should go this route. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And Sholan, I think what I found really like satisfying was the responses to this. Obviously, people are really interested in it, but there's not one negative response to this tweet. Guys saying, cool name, nice one, like this is what I want to see on my timeline, good progress. You know, like really people are seriously chuffed about what he's doing. I think there's something there for unity in the country. Yeah. People want to see other people succeed generally, I think. So maybe there's a recipe for success here, some sustainable Ubuntu. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you, Alex. I think that especially like on social media, or even if you just put on the news for a second, we are flooded with stories of how terrible things are going and how chaotic things are, and this thing is being burnt down and this person is stealing money. I mean, those are terrible situations to hear about all the time. That for a success story for this to reach so many people with just one social media post is incredible. And I think that's exactly what I would want my timeline to be flooded with going forward is, you know, success stories of people who actually were unashamed to be like, you know what, I'm going to try something. And as Vusi mentioned at the start is that, you know what, I'm not afraid to fail. And exactly, failure should actually be seen as an indication of progress. And that's exactly something that we should be encouraging, because I do think many times people see this and they're probably like, nah, you know what, I wouldn't do it just in case I fail, just in case I lose. I don't want to sell biscuits. It's not dignified. But I'm like, guys, this man is making an income for himself. He's providing for his family. Unashamedly, he's making a living wage, and that's something so many people talk about but are so unwilling to go and get. My guy, sure, Alex.
Yeah, like the example you mentioned earlier, Tiago, you know, 15,000 Rand is a hell of a lot more than the 350 Rand the government's going to give you for your bag of groceries. So yeah, there's definitely something here for all of us. But guys, I think let's leave it there and head into your reactions this week. Unfortunately, Mbali is away. She is ill. But we nonetheless have some interesting reactions from you guys back home who follow us at Badger of Liberty. And we'll jump into that now on your reactions. All right, guys, cool. So this week's content that we're going to look at for your reactions is from our Facebook page. Let me just share it quickly. And it's a quote card, might have been shared before, but it definitely got the conversation going. And this came from a colleague of ours, Tutukani Ndebele, and he says that poor levels of performance in the school system condemn young generations of South Africans to unemployment, poverty, and dependency. Now, the comments around this were, people got emotional, guys. Look, this is for us. Look, not 4 million reactions like the economy did, but you know, it's still, you guys really got involved in the conversation here. Now, there was one comment that you know, we've got comments here like from Mark, who says dependency on the state, you know, taxpayers will keep the ANC's electric blindly voting for them, but there's generally a sense here that the government has failed quite wholeheartedly in providing the platform for good education, and it's something we've shared about a lot on Freedom FANatics. And as Rihanna says here, you know, it's disgraceful. Now we want to obviously look at a bit of a silver lining. Tiago, where do we go with this? How do we? Yeah, what's your reaction to Tutukani's sort of analysis here?
Well, I think I absolutely agree with Tutukani. The failure of any government to invest in the education system of its society will result in its people becoming unemployed, becoming poor, and depending on the state. What we actually need in South Africa is a quality education. Quality education, number one, in terms of the content of the education itself. Secondly, in terms of the education that's provided being in line with what's needed in the market, right? Two. But number three, you also need a quality education that assists every individual to become the best versions of themselves. So say the three of us are in the same classroom, yet we have different talents and skills. At the end of the day, when we leave this classroom, each of us must be empowered to an extent, no matter how different our talents and skills are, right? So the South African government is failing to, South African education system is failing to do that, at least the public sector one. They are trying to get everyone to think the same way, trying to get everyone to utilize, to be talented in the same way, which is impossible, really. We are not really investing in the individual's talents, individual skills, and polishing that. That's precisely what I think we need to do. Once we get to that point, we should have a lot of entrepreneurs coming up because we have assisted them with polishing their talents, with polishing their skills, but as well with getting them to move from dreaming about something to making it a real thing. You know, you empower them with the necessary skills to get to that point. Otherwise, if you don't do that, such as what we are doing right now in South Africa, feeding young people same information that's not even practical for the most part, a whole lot of theory and stuff of that nature, that won't get us far at all.
Absolutely. I think let's take this conversation in a direction here that Juanita de Brain has highlighted. And she thinks that they don't want to educate their voters because smart people won't vote for the ANC. I've never really been convinced by that. I've never thought it's really a deliberate attempt. Sholin, what do you think?
To a certain extent, I do think there's some sort of attempt, especially when it comes to like topics such as history, where the ANC really frames things in a favorable view for them. So I do think there is some merit to a statement, but at the same time, I also think that Alex, you usually make the statement where you say that incompetence shouldn't usually be blamed when it's just the inability. Malice shouldn't be blamed for incompetence. Sorry, is that the correct one? Yeah. And that's exactly the case. What I think, I do not think they are themselves that smart to think about something that brilliant to indoctrinate an entire population. So yeah, I definitely agree. I also want to touch on something that Diego mentioned, especially with like the demand of the market. And that's exactly where that's what our education system is meant to follow, is to see that what going forward, what are going to be some of the not only the jobs but the academic requirements for some of the jobs of the future looking forward, for that we're going to require, and how should we educate people in that regards. And I definitely think things such as whether it's computers or robotics, mechanics, these are things that are going to define the future. And South Africa cannot be left, running after whatever is already being designed, but we should actually be the ones who are leading it, and actually determining how these things look and how these things are going to shape not only our future but our country, our economy. And I think we are really missing the mark, especially our government. They are missing it so badly that I think they are focused on things that are not really that relevant, that's still stuck in apartheid thinking. But our economy and the state of the world is no longer there, and we really need to move with the times, respectfully said. And that's exactly where they need to have a very contemporary mindset. And yeah, I had the opportunity to speak to Jonathan Jansen, Professor Jonathan Jansen, recently, and asked him what was some of like his thoughts around, what can actually be done to solve our education system, because he's a professor of education. And one of the things that he mentioned, and usually my expectation was like, this man's going to come up with brilliant ideas around policy and all of these things need to be structured. And the one thing he mentioned was the level of accountability in South Africa is zero. There is no accountability in our school systems that is encouraged, whether it's keeping even teachers accountable, principals accountable, our education officials accountable. There is a disassociation of parents who they see really how much the children might be struggling within failing education system, but they are not giving the opportunity. They are not given the opportunities to keep the leaders, or whatever the case may be, accountable. And it really comes down to where parents are not able to financially give to an education system, and that's why the IRR advocates for something like school vouchers that gives parents, vouchers in their hand so that they can keep schools accountable, to be like, if you don't teach my child properly, I'm going to a different school. And that's what school vouchers is, something that fixes that. And that's why I do think accountability, whether it's in the form of school governing bodies, and it literally separates private schools from public schools. Where private schools, there are so much accountability because parents are like, yeah, I'm giving a lot of money, my kid better have a proper education. And at public schools, it's just like, we just want my kid to be in school. It's the scraps. It's like, it's at the bottom. Like, just teach my kid. And it's a very unfortunate situation to be in, that a standard is not demanded. So I think that's something where we can definitely improve as well.
Tiago, I'm going to give you the final say before we wrap up today.
Well, I think let me not mess it up. I think everything that Sheldon has said wraps it up for me. I agree with everything that he has said. I do think that education is a crisis that we must fix as soon as possible. I mean, even in universities, for example, you go to universities right now, let's say you go into the accounting stream, look at how they are teaching them at many universities. I'll speak about Rhodes University. They are still teaching people accounting, for example, in a manual manner, whereas in the actual market, very few big corporate companies are still working manually. There are certain systems and certain applications that are being utilized because that's where the world is moving towards. So we really need for our education system to be linked with where we are, the times, where we are moving. Accounting shouldn't still be offered in that manual manner. Yes, you can still teach someone that when the system is off, this is what you can utilize. But for a university like Rhodes, that produces so many accountants on a yearly basis, to still be teaching people manually, whereas all of them are going to a technology world, it's madness. We really need to take education seriously as a country.
No, absolutely. And I think let's leave it there, guys. I think what we'll do is we'll wrap up with a little clip from a minister. Speaking of a lack of accountability, we'll leave you with a clip from a esteemed minister on a popular news channel, and then we'll say our goodbyes. Guys, thank you so much for joining. Remember, you can catch us at Badger of Liberty on Facebook, Twitter, as well as Instagram and TikTok. Right. Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you next time on Freedom FANatics.
I don't know. How can you not know, Minister? You know what? I don't know. But that would be astounding, Minister.